Welcome to the Leverage Your Influence podcast, where we talk about how people leverage their influence, impact, and income through the amazing art and science of podcasting. Today, we are honored to have a conversation with Terri Brown. Terri was born in Athens, Greece, as an Air Force brat, and she came into this world with a lot of imagination and stories to tell. And we are excited to hear more about her journey and stories on today. Welcome, Terri, to the Leverage Your Influence podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, GP.
It's an honor to have you here. And so for the folks who are just getting to know who you are, whether they're on Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, if you could describe yourself in one or two sentences, how would you describe Terri Brown?
I am an author, podcaster, um, a grandma, a mom, um, and I love words and I love connecting with people.
Amazing, amazing. And you have written a few books, I might assume. Can you tell
Yes.
us how many books you have written?
Um, so I wrote five nonfiction books about 20 years ago that it never really went anywhere. In the past, well, since 2022, I now have three novels. I have a memoir that just came out. I'm in a short story collection, and I have a children's book.
Amazing, amazing.
So
And your inspiration for writing obviously comes from your creativity and your life perspective. But when did you first get that writing bug? How old were you when you felt drawn to stories and this form of creation?
told everyone that as a little girl, I wanted to be a writer, but I also thought I wanted to be an Olympic ice skater, and that was never going to happen. So I don't think I really knew. I've always loved words and books and was an avid reader. Life kind of takes over, and I had four children, and I got divorced and I remarried, and that marriage was a horrible marriage that I stayed in for 14 years because I didn't want to be divorced a second time. But when I got out of that horrible relationship in 2017, words started pouring out of me.
Mm,
And I started writing manuscripts, but I was terrified to let them out into the world because I was still pretty damaged having been in this bad relationship for so long. I met Bruce, who became my third husband, and he and I rode a tandem bicycle from the coast of Oregon to Washington, D.C. And yeah, it was a huge adventure. And at
mm.
the end of that trip, because this was something way outside of my comfort zone, because I am not an athletic person. Um, at the end of the trip, I thought, I can do anything. I just rode across the United States on a tandem bicycle. I can literally do anything.
Wow.
It's not a matter of can I, it's a matter of what. What do I want to do? And I said, I want to be an author. And 14 months later, my first book came out. And since then, like I said, I've written three and then a memoir about that ride across the United States and a children's book. And yeah, I'm going strong.
That is
So
phenomenal. Phenomenal. Congratulations. And I
thank you.
noticed you mentioned some of the trauma that you've been through and how
Mhm.
that was a hindrance to you creating. Even though
Yeah.
you were being creative, you are not in a space where you are willing to let the world know what you are creating and
When
to do it
when you're gonna yeah, when
confidently.
you're gonna right, when you're gonna let your characters out, that creativity, that stuff that's from deep within you, you have to have a safe spot. Someplace that if it doesn't go well, if someone doesn't like what you've done, that you have a safe spot to land.
Wow.
Warm arms that are going to go around you and tell you it's okay, you can try again. Well, I didn't have that. And
Wow.
so putting myself out into the world was just too terrifying. And even when I left that relationship, there's a lot of damage. You live in an emotionally abusive relationship for 14 years and you walk away, but you're not the same person that walked into that relationship.
Hmm.
And so it took a lot of healing and a lot of figuring out, like, who was I? And realizing that I did have value and worth and was an intelligent woman who could do things. And that ride did that for me because I had to dig really deep to
Wow.
succeed at something like that. So it was
Yeah.
it was an amazing, it was awesome. Yeah.
That's amazing that that trip literally changed your life
It did.
and gave you
It
the
did.
confidence to pursue your dreams.
Yeah. Yeah. My husband tells everyone that the person who started the trip and the person that ended the trip are two different women.
Wow. Wow. So after becoming an author, when did you venture into podcasting or stumble into it? How did that come across?
I did stumble. That's no lie. It was not something that I had ever thought of. My first book came out in January of 2022, and I was an accidental author. I had no idea what I was doing. And my book came out, and I sat in front of the computer and I waited for it to sell. And I realized very quickly that's not how this works, and that I needed to do some marketing. And podcasting was something that seemed like an easy way for me to reach audiences that I couldn't reach living on the coast of North Carolina easily. So I started becoming a guest on a podcast.
Mm,
And so I guested a lot. And the more I did it, the more I realized that I really love it. I love this idea of having a conversation with someone and we record it and then it can go out to the world. It's a good fit for me. And then I had a friend who had a podcast online for authors, which is the one I have now, and she was getting burned out.
mm.
She was kind of tired of it all. And she said, "Hey, would you guest host for me? I'll do all the back end if you'll just get on and talk with these authors." So I did that, 5 or 6, and I loved it. And I thought, oh, this is perfect because I don't have to do any of the hard work. I just do the fun. And then she said, "I'm getting rid of it. Do you want it?"
Wow.
And I said, "Oh, no, no, I don't have enough time. But maybe, well, tell me a little more about it." And then, well, no, yes. And I went back and forth. And then I got a note from an author that I had done a podcast with. And he, what he said to me was so amazing because he wrote a memoir. His family was Jewish during the Holocaust.
Mm,
And so he wrote this memoir, and it was one I was very afraid to tackle because I was afraid, like, what if I say the wrong thing, or I don't know, it just worried me. And what he wrote about how kind I was and how it helped him get his story out, and da da da. As soon as I got that, I said, "That's it. I'm going to take it over." So I took over a podcast a little over a year ago, so in
wow.
January of 2024, and I love it. I love it because it gives me a chance to be out in the world. And I love it because I offer other authors a chance to get out in the world.
There it is. There it is. I
Yeah.
love it. So you were a part of a podcast acquisition deal.
Yeah. Except it was more like, "Hey, do you want it? I'll give it to you." And I said, "Absolutely, I'll take it."
Yeah.
But she had burned herself out. She was
Yeah.
trying to do too many other things at the same time. I changed it up a little. I don't do nearly as much editing as she did. She did a lot of very detailed editing. And so for every 1 hour, she had 2 or 3 hours of editing. And for every 30 minutes that I do, I have about 3 minutes of editing.
Wow.
I add a beginning, I add an end. I cut out something if it was really bad. I'll mark down that time as we're talking and I'll think, yeah, we do not want this in here because, I don't know, something horrible. Like I had one author accidentally give away the end of their book,
Wow.
right? And you don't want that. So I
No.
went in and cut that out. But generally speaking, we just let it run. And I
Yeah.
tell people we're having coffee and bagels together and we're just having a chat. And, you know, if you scratch your nose, if you say we're not going to worry about those
Yeah.
things.
So what's
So
phenomenal is it was someone else's podcast, but you are keeping the legacy alive and
yeah,
breathing new life into it and
yeah,
allowing other authors to have their stories told. Because a lot of times folks are just the person behind the book creating characters and people don't really know about them. And so the
right.
opportunity for them to have a space to share about themselves and to be highlighted is truly special. And so I want to
Well,
affirm
and
you. Yeah,
what I have found as an author myself is that if I have been in front of an audience and they hear my story, they are more likely to buy my book. They are also more likely to sign up for my newsletter.
there you
They are
go.
more likely to stay on my newsletter.
Yep.
They're more likely to open my newsletter and pay attention to it when it comes out. So I wanted to help other authors be able to tell that story, be able to start talking about who they are as an author. Because when we are marketing our books, we're really marketing ourselves.
Yep.
I'm Terri M. Brown, the author. And I have these books and I have my podcast, but they want to know more about me. And I
Yeah.
love that idea of being able to have that podcast that lets these authors tell their cool stories. How did they come up with that idea? What's their writing life like? What do they drink first thing in the morning to get themselves in the mood to write? All of those
Right.
things. And people like them. Readers want to know about their authors.
Yes. I love to say all the time that every person is just a name until you know their story.
Exactly.
And the opportunity to get to know an author of a book that you love or are reading is truly special, because if you think about it, even if it's just audio builds intimacy, video
Yeah.
builds engagement. And so you're creating a whole new experience around a movement that already exists. And
Right.
honestly, I truly believe that podcasting is one of the best ways for anybody to leverage their influence and impact and to build their audience, and also to build engagement and connection, which is something that we're truly lacking in these
Right.
times.
Well, and I have met, writing is solitary. You don't do it in a group. You do it very much alone. And a lot of authors spend a lot of time alone.
Yeah.
But I have met authors all across the United States and across the world, people I would have never had a chance to meet in person because of the podcast.
Yeah.
And I make all of these connections, people I can reach out to when a new book is coming out. I have this list of authors that I can reach out to and say, hey, do any of you have the time or space to read this and go ahead and get a review up for me?
Yeah.
These are people who are now part of my tribe. And it's because we made this connection on
Yes.
the podcast, and
Yeah.
it's fabulous.
And
Yeah.
one of the best things about podcasting is the people that you meet along the way
Yeah.
and the connections that you make, like you mentioned, Terry. Now, imagine someone writing a book and they need to get the word out. They could literally do a podcast tour to
Yes.
promote their book, to get the word out
Absolutely.
to different audiences and communities.
Absolutely.
And it's almost a no-brainer. But why do you think so many authors are hesitant when it comes to podcasting and content creation? Oh, I don't do the camera thing. I don't like putting myself out there. I just want to sit in a bubble and write. What are they missing out on?
I think that a lot of people, you know, are afraid to speak in public. And I was one of those. I've gotten over it now, but I was one of them. And so my very first podcast that I was on, I was a nervous wreck. I knew this was going to be like, what was I doing? And then I realized it's like having a conversation. Because although there is a huge audience out there, I don't see them. So I don't have to feel afraid. I know how to talk. I know how to have a conversation. And once I grasped, but that's what it is. Podcast hosts are not trying to trick you. They're not trying to get you to say something you didn't want to say. They're not trying to make you look bad. It's not like being on a news program, like one of the horrible news shows, where they're trying to get you to say something and trip you up. That's not what it is. They're trying to they want their show to look good,
Yeah.
right? They want to make their guest look good. That's the whole point. So they're not going to throw questions at you that you can't answer. You know, and here's the other thing I found. Sometimes people will ask me a question and I won't have an immediate answer. And so I just say, never thought of that before. That's a really great question. Let me think about that for a little while because I'm human and it's
Right.
okay to not have all the answers. And I think that if we can get guests, authors for me, who understand that this is just a conversation about you, your writing, your book, things you know about that you have the answer to, that it becomes an easier way to go ahead and get yourself out there. I know I just had the launch for 10 Little Rules for a Double-Butted Adventure, which is my memoir about riding across the United States.
Hmm.
And I was on 23 podcasts
Wow.
in about 6 weeks.
Wow.
And I just had them going out all the time and had book reviews going out in between all of those. And I did a little virtual tour where every day, if you got on my social media, you saw the next podcast you could go and pay attention to. And that's where I was. And I just think it's a wonderful way to get yourself out there,
Yeah.
especially if for any reason in your life you're kind of stuck at home. For up until recently, my husband has been sick with cancer. He passed away.
Mm,
But for over 2 years, I couldn't really leave the area for
mm,
any extended period of time because I was his caregiver. And there are people who are moms who have a day job
yeah.
and can't just up and leave for 6 weeks and go on a tour. But there's nothing stopping you from doing a virtual tour,
That's right.
you know, because you can do that around your any other schedule you have.
Exactly.
And most podcast hosts will work with you.
Oh, yeah.
And if you find one that won't, then it's just not the right podcast for you, move on. But most of them will find a time that works for you. If you tell them, look, I can only do weekends or evenings, they'll find a time.
Yeah. If you say
So
midnight, we'll do it. We'll
yeah,
make the time.
yeah, you'll make the time. I mean, especially if you feel that the person coming on is going to add to your show, you're willing to work it out with them.
Yeah.
Like here's some times that I have. Do any of these fit you? So
Phenomenal. So Terry, if
yeah.
if someone's listening here today or later, the rebroadcast, and they're thinking, you know what, I have a book or two, and I haven't really thought about getting on podcasts to get the word out about my book, but I may want to consider being a guest on
Yeah.
Terry's podcast. Do you interview all authors or nonfiction authors or fiction authors? Give me the scope of
Yeah.
authors that you cover on your podcast.
So I do mostly fiction. I do not do horror because I can't read it. I am the person, by the way, I read the book first before I
Wow.
have a conversation. So I read all the books. So I don't do horror and I don't do anything that's too sexually graphic simply because I don't feel like chatting about that on air. It would embarrass me. I do memoir. I don't do a lot of nonfiction unless it's memoir.
Okay.
So I'm mostly fiction and memoir, and I I love all genres. And yeah, I mean, definitely reach out to me. You can find me on my website, which is my name, Terri M. Brown, Terry with one R.
All right. And one last question for
Yeah,
someone who may be watching this episode who is experiencing what people call writer's block
yeah.
and they're having a hard time getting their project out. What word of advice would you give to them?
I think writer's block is really that you're not giving that portion, your creativity portion of your brain space.
Mm,
That there's no space to play. That usually happens because you've got too many other things going on that are like crowding it out. For instance, my husband passed away in January, and it has only been just recently that I've been able to write at all because my mind was too busy with all of that, all of the grief and the other things that go along with it. Your creativity needs space. So if you find yourself blocked up, the first thing you need to do is look around your life and say, what is crowding out the play space for my creativity? And then figure out how to either fix it or box it up and only bring it out when you need to or whatever. And then do whatever it is that works for you to bring out creativity. For me, a good walk on the beach. I walk on the beach, and my first half of the walk, I'm usually walking really fast and all the yuck is flying off of me. And the last half of that walk, I'm walking with the waves. I'm breathing with the waves, and I come up with incredible ideas. And I'm
yeah.
talking into my phone, capturing them so that I can get home and make sure that I know what I want to do with it. And so find that, whatever that is for you, to allow that space for your creativity to come out.
Amazing advice. Thank you so much, Terry, for sharing your story about your podcasting journey, your journey as an author, and the valuable advice to all the other creatives out there. Once again, can you just share your website, how people can find you, where they can find you to connect with you online?
Absolutely. So go to my website, which is terrimmbrown.com, and that's Terry with one R. There you can find everything. I've got all my social media links there. I have a newsletter you can sign up for. My podcast is there. I even have a contact page that if you just want to reach out to me and ask me a question, you can reach out there. You can buy all my books, of course. So, pretty much whatever I do is there on that website.
Awesome. Thank you. And be sure to support everybody and to connect with her. Want to thank you, Terri, for being willing to be a guest on the Leverage Your Influence podcast. We were truly inspired by your story, and we look forward to hearing more great things about what you are doing. Thank you, everyone, for
Thank you
joining us
so
today.
much.
We'll catch you next time on the Leverage Your Influence podcast. Take care.